Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, it is I am the one and only Pac-Man here, and I am from the likes of the Mixy Toys videos. And ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our brand new Let's Play for the channel, and this time we're going back onto the Pac-Man World series of games once again, after about a year ago, that I'm presuming about the fact that we've already done Pac-Man World Repack last year. So here we are now in 2024, and this time we're going on to the Game Boy Advance version of Pac-Man World. Now, do you guys even remember, since at around 5 years ago, that we originally did the forms of the original version of Pac-Man World for the PlayStation 1 back in 2019? No, we actually really enjoyed that particular version of the game. So here we are now in 2024, and now we ended up in the Game Boy Advance version of Pac-Man World 1. Well, mind you about the fact that this version of the game in particular, for whatever reason, it did came out in 2004, as opposed to the forms of how it does it on Pac-Man World 2 for the Game Boy Advance, which came out in 2002. So, it's kind of weird for that circumstances anyway. So either way, wow, the music has gone really loud, so I think I should probably turn that down for a bit, just to ensure that you can hear my commentary and stuff like that. So anyway, now this is my first time playing through Pac-Man World for the Game Boy Advance, because I've heard about this game before, and as far as I'm concerned, it plays kind of similar to the original PlayStation 1 version, except there are some slight differences. I mean, there are some major differences here and there. Like, for whatever reason, in the opening cutscene as you saw from earlier, basically though is about the fact that not only does it seems to have some very strange transitions with all this particular Pac-Man's friends has been captured, but it's also worth noting for us that the background music you're going to be hearing though is actually based off from one of those factory world levels in Pac-Man World for the PlayStation. So seems kind of strange kind of thinking about it though, although my guess is probably because it was on a handheld's limitations, or perhaps it was on the cartridge or anything else to be more specific. So either way, so as you can tell, the story plays out pretty similar to the forms of how it does in the original version of the game on the PlayStation, even though except the fact that this time around though it's not fully animated. So instead, and on top of that, there's no voice acting at all. So instead you're able to actually see is there's some bits of animation here and there, and on top of all that stuff though, there's some text here and there to able to know about the forms of how the fact that at least the actual dialogue are pretty much exactly the same as the original version, but again though, there's a lack of voice acting. So either way, let's get to it with Pac-Man World for the Game Boy Advance. So as a result, this game plays pretty much like the PlayStation version, except the fact that obviously though it does have some slight differences, like I said before, like for instance that as you can see, the actual perspective was actually in the isometric view. And on top of all that stuff though is about the fact that you can still able to do river rolls, and in addition to butt bounce and all that stuff. But there's one little thing you might able to realize about this, and that's what appears to be about the fact that we're now going to be doing with the game with lesser amounts of buttons. So because of this though, basically though is about the fact that in order to able to perform a river roll, you have to simply press the B button while standing completely still, and then use the butt bounce by simply pressing the A button twice. And also, if you really want able to toss the actual Pac pellet, or specifically the Pac dot, as a projectile, I believe you have to press the R button this time around. So because of that though, that's something I need to try to get used to it. And on top of all that stuff though, Pac-Man, are you feeling okay? I mean, look at the actual sprites of Pac-Man. Does he look weird to you? Although, usually relatively speaking though, it's about the fact that from what I can tell, that the level design on the Game Boy Advance version of Pac-Man World are basically just a kind of like a similar structure as the forms of how it does on the console version, or the PlayStation version to be more specifically, except the fact that, as you can tell, that the actual transitions is actually a lot different this time around, because I thought that on the original PlayStation version, it's all like continuous scrolling, or continuous camera movements and stuff like that, whilst in the Game Boy Advance version, if you couldn't tell, some sections are divided into a few separate transitions. So because of that though, again, it's probably because of the handheld's limitations, and generally speaking, it was about the fact that you can probably get the idea of what I was expecting to talk about. So either way, as usual, you can still able to collect some fruit and all that stuff, and also destroy some bit of of enemies here now as well, to able to rank up points, and that's all there is to anything about it. However, one thing I have to admit though right away is that there are a lot of issues I've somehow come across into throughout the entire version of the game, which you'll definitely know why during at some point in the later stages to come. So either way though, now of course, just like before, we're able to actually get ourselves some power-ups, ranging from Metal Pac-Man, where for whatever reason, that the color scheme of Metal Pac-Man is actually a little bit off in this version of the game. Well, I'm sure about the fact that, relatively speaking, it's about the fact that, again, it's my first time experiencing this version of the game. Mind you, I have seen gameplay footage of this game, and it looks kind of promising to say the least, but trust me, what I'm saying is about the fact that it does have a lot of potential issues with this version of the game until the later stages to come, like I said before. So either way, yeah, a few things I want to talk about is about the fact that, well, today's date, of course, there is the 14th of September today, in some cases in 2024 today. Now, we were originally decided able to actually just, you know, try to tackle through Sonic Generations for the 3DS just before, you know, Sonic X Shadow Generations is about to be releasing. Well, suffice to say though, that particular playthrough will be delayed during at some point in Journey Forms by the end of this year or something like that. Well, it's a bit tricky to judge at this point, especially concerning for the fact that at this point in time, that both Maxie and Ray are both still going to be playing through Luigi's Mansion 2, or specifically Luigi's Mansion Dark Moon, for those of you who lived in North America, or even especially noticeable with the HD version on the Switch version, and usually, relatively speaking, that Ray the Flying Squirrel, he's still working on The Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening remake for sure. But either way though, now of course, just like the forms of how it does on the console version, you can still able to activate certain switches that actually cost about quite a number of things here and there. Like for instance, I get the strong feeling about the fact that it does have different colored coding switches that does different things. Like for instance, I'm pretty sure the blue switch will able to activate something that's very useful if you manage to backtrack or something. Now I believe if you manage to activate the green switch, something is about to appear. Now I believe if you activate the yellow switch, it can able to actually act as a time limit or sorts. So either way though, yeah, for the most part though, the first level is pretty easy, because obviously though we can get used to with the tutorial and all that stuff, just like the forms of how it does on the PlayStation version. So there's also kind of nice though is about the fact that this game in particular, just like the console version, you do have a save feature. Whilst unlike the forms of how it does on the sequel, which appears to be Pac-Man World 2, specifically on the Game Boy Advance version, for some reason the save feature was not included on Pac-Man World 2 for the Game Boy Advance. So instead you have to able to implement it, the passwords. So because of that though, yeah, I think suffice to say though is about the fact that, well, it is kind of interesting about the fact that we're going on to a different version of Pac-Man World 1 presumably for the third time or something like that, or the second time I should say, because I know for a fact that, well, we've already did done, you know, like I said before, we've already did done Pac-Man World 1 back in Journey Forms in 2019, just around that time when Halloween is getting closer, and the same applies with the forms of how the fact that when Luigi's Mansion 3 did came out during that time, and on top of that, like I mentioned this earlier, that we've already did done Pac-Man World Repack from last year, especially concerning to try to celebrate with certain gaming announcements when it comes to the forms of Summer Game Fest, which as a result, during last year, we got Sonic Superstars and all that stuff. So anyway, something's worth noting for, in regards to the forms of this particular version of the game plays out to be, I will not gonna lie to you that I'm not a big fan of this isometric viewpoint right there. And also worth noting for is that the soundtrack is pretty much limited in this version of the game, because as far as I'm aware, I was assuming about the fact that we can able to hear a different music in Journey Forms at the later stages. Well, apparently though, we're gonna be hearing the first level's music over and over again, not just once, but 3 times. So because of that though, again, it's probably because of the handheld's limitations. So because of that though, and it's also worth noting for is about the fact that the actual music itself sounds a bit, it sounds not great as the forms of how it does it on not only the original PlayStation game, but as well as the forms of Repack version as well, as a full-on remake. So because of that though, yeah, I think my expectations of this version of the game is actually ridiculously low at this point in time, especially concerning for the fact that, well, as you can tell, about the fact that no matter what though, that we can able to actually you know, trying to able to explore around and stuff like that. And also, just like the forms of how it does in the original version of Pac-Man World 1, in addition to Pac-Man World Repack as a remake, you can still able to collect those Pac-Man letters, which obviously though there are 6 letters that we need to find, which is of course P-A-C-M-A-N, which stands for Pac-Man. Now, here's what makes things a little bit confusing, or to be more specifically, what I found was a little bit stupid by the way, is about the fact that unlike the console version, including the 2022 remake, that basically though, if you collect all of these letters that spelled Pac-Man, that pretty much leads us to the bonus level where not only you can able to collect certain fruits, but also you can get extra lives more often. In this particular game, on the other hand though, there are no, I repeat, there are no bonus levels in the entire version of the game. So no matter what though, it doesn't matter if you managed able to collect all of these letters that spell out Pac-Man, well, suffice to say, unfortunately though, you're out of luck when it comes to trying to grind as many of those lives as you possibly could. And thus, for I've heard anyway, this version of the game is actually a lot harder than the forms of how it does on the console version, including the remake counterpart in 2022. And you'll see why as soon as we get into the 3rd level in the game, or generally speaking though, early one in the game as far as this is concerned, which is especially noticeable concerning for the fact that, like I said this before, I'm not a big fan of the forms of this isometric view in this game, especially because you can't really tell of what to judge about the forms of what you're gonna land on, which is especially noticeable concerning for the fact that if we get into the later stages, then you definitely know what I'm talking about here. So anyways though, also, I just want to classify for notice something like this is about the fact that I'm pretty sure that we've almost there to the halfway point in terms of September in regards to the forms of 2024, and suffice to say we've only got about, let's just say, 17 more days to go until we're about to be approaching on to October, which is a month where not only Super Mario Party Jamboree is going to be releasing, but same applies with Sonic X Shadow Generations, and I'm still looking forward to those 2 games coming up as soon as when I managed able to pre-order those games and join at some form or another. So Anyways, let's go ahead. Really? There goes my first step. Early one in the game. So yeah, this is what I'm talking about. The perspective on the isometric view can get very disorienting, which not only it just guarantees you might able to actually miss the actual platforms, we can almost guarantee about the fact that you might come across into a lot of frustrating trial and error death situations. And not to mention though, there aren't any visible walls in certain parts throughout the level, because imagine this, right? If I accidentally go down, and then as a result, if I fell in, that counts as a death, by the way. So because of that though, yeah, that's pretty annoyingly consistent sometimes. At least I'll give Sonic 3D Blast some credit for, at the very least, despite the fact that the isometric view can be a bit of a struggle at times in Sonic 3D Blast. Well, regardless of such though, is about the fact that at the very least there are a bunch of invisible walls for certain areas you can able to traverse into, although despite the fact you get out to keep on collecting those godforsaken fleekies in order to able to progress, mind you. So that's besides the point. But yeah, let me know in the comments down below for the question of the day. Have you guys ever experienced the Game Boy Advance version of Pac-Man World 1? Because, again, my expectations are a little bit lower compared to the forms of how it does on the console version, including Pac-Man World Repack, because I'm not gonna lie, I still really managed able to really enjoy not only the PlayStation version of Pac-Man World 1, but also with the remake as well, because I'm not gonna lie, I actually really enjoy Pac-Man World 1, because it's really dang good. Although, not as perfect as the forms of how it does on the second game in my opinion, even though it's a shame about the fact that Pac-Man World 2 never gets a remake treatment, sadly, which I was assuming that will be the case. Well, usually at the same time though, about the fact that I have no idea what the sales numbers is actually going to be on its records in regards to the forms of Pac-Man World Repack when it comes to sales numbers and all that stuff. Well, I digress though. And of course, just like before, we can able to actually swim, and basically though is about the fact, I'm pretty sure pressing the A button will allow you to swim upwards, whilst if you press the B button you can swim downwards. So either way though, that's something's worth noting for anyway. So of course, we can able to activate the actual trail of Pac Dots to reveal certain secrets here, ranging from an A, and on top of that, certain fruits, alongside with the forms of these health widgets and all that stuff. So, yeah, nothing new from here, apart from the fact that, as you can clearly tell, there's no Galaxian mazes to be found. So, yeah, because unlike the forms of how it does it on Pac-Man World 1, including the remake as well, that normally, if you manage to able to obtain a Galaxian, or yeah, just a Galaxian item in general, basically though, you can able to actually use that to actually access to these bonus mazes you can able to actually go into. In here though, the mazes are completely gone, and same applies with the forms of this playable game of Pac-Man, which I'm guessing is probably because we already got Pac-Man on the actual one of those Game Boy Advance compilation games with the forms of Pac-Man collection, so I can possibly understand why that Pac-Man game was not included in this version of the game in this time around though. So either way though, yeah, I'm just, oh my god. Yeah, there might be a couple of times though about the fact that, you know, every once in a while though, if you think you're trying to able to actually find yourself a bit safer, but sometimes though, when it comes to tricky platforming, I think the worst case scenario though is the next level coming up, which, as far as I'm aware, that'll drain lives very, very fast, especially noticeable concerning for the fact that, well, yeah, I think I should probably save that particular topic once we get to that level in particular. And it's also worth noting for is that unlike the console version, including the remake, that normally in each and every single world does manage to have a boss fight, which obviously though that could be pretty intense to able to actually try to fight against them. In the Game Boy Advance version though, on the other hand, there aren't any bosses aside from one, so meaning about the fact that we can't face up against with the forms of not only the Windbag, but same applies with the forms of King Galaxian, and on top of that, there's no clown race either. So because of that though, well, at least on the bonus points to the Game Boy Advance version, to me though, is that thank goodness we don't have to worry about trying to face off against with Anubis Rex, because I already know for the fact that on the original is incredibly frustrating, and while the remake is actually a tad bit more easier compared to the forms of how it does in the originals to me though, but that doesn't excuse about the fact that the Game Boy Advance version did manage to cut out quite a number of things, which as a result, this is more likely to consider this to be the watered down version of Pac-Man World 1 that we all adore on the original PlayStation. So because of that though, yeah, I can totally see why a lot of people seem to don't usually talk about this game as much, specifically on the Game Boy Advance version. So either way though, so yeah, that pretty much does it for the second level right here. Now let's move on to, presumably, the final level in the pirate world, and that's what appears to be Crazy Cannonade. So, and I think this is one of the levels that I was talking about earlier, and as a result, remember that particular isometric platforming we have to deal with right there? Well, we have to deal with this isometric platforming a lot in this stage, and suffice to say, this stage is by far the hardest stage in the entire game so far, to be more specifically on the Game Boy Advance version, mind you, because again, that you'll see why as soon as we're able to get into the forms of trying to go from cannon to cannon, or anything else to be more specifically, or specifically pop-up turns to be more to be exact. So either way though, I mean, for the most part though, it's about the fact that I think this is now the third time we're going to be hearing that particular I'm not gonna lie, the soundtrack in this version of the game sounds a little bit too crunched and stuff like that. I get it because it's on a GBA and it sounds a little bit too compressed compared to the forms of how it does it on the console version to me though, because I still find the soundtrack in the original game sounds a lot more amazing. The same applies with the forms of the remake as well with Repack, but that's just me. So it may look like we need an apple to be able to actually access to one of those fruit doors, which, yes, just like before, you can able to actually use those fruits to able to open up certain fruit doors to able to reveal certain stuff, ranging from switches and all that stuff. And yeah, R button allows you to able to throw pack darts right at certain enemies, or specifically at nothing. So yeah, that's what I can really say about this, I guess. So either way though, it's also worth noting for is that certain levels has been cut as well, which you'll see why, and during whenever it gets to the point when it comes to uploading schedules department, it will obviously be on Saturdays and Sundays basically, because this game is not going to be that long to able to actually complete it for, but we'll say this right from the start though, before I continue things on, this is not going to be a fully 100% completion straight off the bat, because no matter what though, the isometric view platforming can get a lot more messy sometimes, especially concerning for the fact that, well, again, there aren't any bonus levels to be found, and not to mention though is about the fact that there's no slot machines either, so because of that though, you are basically limited. Well, in order to be able to get a bunch of extra lives for, is you have to farm them, at least to be more specifically, if you're trying to go back to the previous stages or something like that, and as a result, it's not only it's not that fun when it comes to likely traversing certain levels like this, which is especially noticeable in right here, that now we need to able to jump from platform to platform with these pop-up turrets with isometric platforming, which, or specifically, the isometric view perspective. So because of that though, yeah, it's not as great as I thought it was going to. Especially to make matters even worse though, if you time your jumps a little bit too early, especially you need to pay attention to the forms of the sprite animation with that particular pop-up turret. Basically though, if you time it too early, you fall to your death. And on top of all that stuff though, if that particular pop-up turret was actually on the flat animation, obviously though, that will be safe, at least for the majority of the time. However though, there is one annoying element I want to address something, and that's what appears to be about the fact that if you dare manage to able to use the reveral right at certain objects, including bash into certain walls or cannon pop-up turrets, guess what? There's no recovery from it. So because of that though, this means about the fact that we're going to be spending most of our time trying to able to do some very tricky, stop on the dying platforming skills, whilst unlike the forms of how it, well, on the console version that still applies, but usually I found the console version to be a lot more thrilling and as well as satisfaction at the same time to me though. But from here though, you have to do a lot of stop on the dying kind of situation. You know, it's kind of like the forms of how it does it from not only from Sonic Rush, but as well as Sonic Rush Adventure and Sonic Colors on some extent on the DS version, but also applies with the forms of Sonic the Hedgehog 4, Episode 1, and maybe Episode 2 as well. Well, I get ahead of myself right there, so either way though, thus I can't even judge the actual specific depth of it at all, because I'm almost assuming about the fact that the cannonballs will decide to hit me, but apparently I'm safe, so I guess that's that. So anyways though, and it's also worth noting for, yeah, I didn't get myself the physical copy version of the game, because let me tell you, I might be a little bit more, well, I don't know about you, because I know for a fact that, oh Jesus Louise, it's just that I have to concentrate on this part right here, because again, if you slip up once, you have to start all over at the beginning of this particular section right there. So, although thankfully though, the checkpoints act out quite frequently, especially just like the forms of how it does it on the Klonoa games on the Game Boy Advance. Basically though, the checkpoints will always active if you manage to able to proceed onto the next room, so there's always that. So, yeah, this is what I mean about the fact that trying to go from those pop-up turrets is a way too finicky process, especially concerning for the fact that I honestly have no words to say about this, especially concerning for the fact that, well, I have to like find myself trying to able to actually get myself my good bounce height when it comes to butt bounce and all that stuff. Well, at the same time though, it's all about timing, so if you time it wrong, then obviously though you will slip off and you have to start all over at the beginning portion of that section again. So that's never fun to me though, although, unlike the forms of how it does it on Pac-Man World 2, on the other hand, on the Game Boy Advance, well, like I mentioned this before, is about the fact that you have to utilize with the password system on Pac-Man World 2 on the Game Boy Advance. But you know what's the worst part though? If you get a game over, you have to start all over at the beginning portion of the game, although there is actually a password if you do somehow memorize it, but I'm sure we'll get into more details about that particular version of the game, probably at some point until next year, if depends on the forms of the actual specific situations going on. So either way though, so yeah, that's what I can really say about this, I guess. So either way though, I mean, for the most part though, it's about the fact that, oh, there's that extra life, and oh jeez, okay, there we go. That was a close call, but again, it's just about the fact that there's a lot of like tricky situations that we could have to able to avoid, a lot of hazards and all that stuff, which again, that's what I can really think about it. Oh god, okay. Get off. Okay. I wonder what's down there. Oh, just a nan. Although, I will admit though, it is kind of pointless because obviously though, like I said before, if you somehow managed able to obtain every single letters that spelled Pac-Man, there's no way to able to actually access the bonus area, so this means you're out of luck, especially concerning for the fact that, well, I can see why about the fact that this version of the game is considerably much harder than the other versions of Pac-Man World these days, so... But either way though, it may look like we're now actually at the very end of the level basically. And suffice to say though, much like the fonts of how it does on the original PlayStation Classic, alongside with the fonts of Pac-Man World Repack, there are some keys that you do need to get, by the way, in order to able to actually rescue one of Pac-Man's friends. Now I'm sure enough though is about the fact that I believe in this one in particular, that we can able to actually save Poker from Dig Dug. So yeah, nothing else I can really say about this, I guess. You see what I mean? If you dare roll, and then basically though, there's no way you can able to actually recover from that. So, yeah, jeez. I'll have to start all over again with this part. And also I will admit though, the music's getting a little bit irritating as well as repetitive at the same time. Well, I can usually understand because again, because of the handheld's limitations, or at least unlike in the console version, including Pac-Man World Repack, that basically though, it does have different music depending on what levels you go into, which adds some bit of variety when it comes to the forms of the actual mood of the atmosphere of certain levels as far as this is concerned. Well, usually this is all I can really think about that, I guess. So, again, I would have liked to discuss upon what's been happening recently, though, but honestly, guys, that's as far as... Oh, come on! I was gonna try to grab onto this ledge, but, of course, the depth perception is not gonna help me that much. Okay, just need to concentrate. It's all about timing as well. Oh, jeez. Believe me what I'm saying is, wish me luck I suppose when it comes to tackle for this version of the game in particular, because I can definitely sure about the fact that this game will test my patience for certain capacity. So either way though, let's just eat up some ghost, even though it doesn't mean that much aside from, well, it gives my health witch, I guess, and on top of all that stuff though, it just managed to give me some bonus points, even though that, well, when it comes to getting extra lifestyle, sadly to tell you, that when it comes to the points tally, it does not get converted as extra lives, sadly. So because of that though, yeah, we are basically limited when it comes to getting extra lives for it. So because of that though, we have no choice but to continue proceedings at this point in time. So yeah, I can totally see why my expectations might be a lot lower in comparison to the console version, basically. So yeah, as you can see, there's no boss fight, and basically, Pirate World is done. So with that being said, folks, is that we got endings off here. So join me next time for more of Let's Play of Pac-Man World for the Game Boy Advance. Instead, we're going on to the next world, which appears to be taking place in the Ruins world. So I'll see you guys until tomorrow. Later, fellas.